Hey there, we're going to be taking a look at Assassin's Creed Odyssey running on the i5-1135G7. Now this is currently set to 1080p and it defaulted to like the high settings, so I was just like, all right, screw it. Let's see how this goes. It went about as smoothly as you would expect it to. That poor little iGPU was just screaming in agony. You were not going to be able to get any playable performance out of, these settings. I really don't know why the Assassin's Creed games always default to high settings. Like it detects the hardware and sometimes it doesn't even recognize it. Like when I'll try to launch the game, it'll just be like, hey, your thing is unsupported, just so you know. And yet it somehow still defaults to the high settings. I don't know, but for sure not playable, but that was expected. Unfortunately, dropping down the settings from high to low does not do anything to alleviate those issues whatsoever. We're still in a very rough spot here. I mean, look at that CPU usage. 100% CPU usage, dude. That is pretty much a CPU bottleneck there. I mean, even the iGPU is not doing as much as it should be doing. We're if it's going down at 83%, that lets you know that we are probably very CPU bottlenecked right now. Then we still can't get a playable frame rate, so 1080p completely out of the question, of course. Unfortunately, of course, since we're reaching CPU bottlenecks, dropping down the resolution isn't going to net you that much of an increase in performance. You're still going to be running into a lot of the same issues, although the iGPU is actually in some ways more used here, but we're still dropping down into the 80s. And that lets you know, again, it's the CPU that is the limiting factor here. And the CPU is not even at 100% usage in a lot of areas, so that just lets you know it's just a handful of cores running at full speed that are kind of just limiting everything here, which makes sense. I mean, the highest clocks we're reaching is just in the 3 gigahertz range. So it's not exactly the greatest level of CPU performance, and that's really holding us back here. To really show you how much of a CPU bottleneck it is, I set the render resolution down to just 50% and I set the adaptive quality on, and it still was pretty much reaching the same levels of performance. So that just goes to show it's completely a CPU bottleneck. There's no way to really uplift this. The iGPU is just not really going to be able to get you good performance on this game.